We were going to call it a patty melt. I thought, no, let's call it a Wendy melt. It's got more zip.
Come in and try the new Wendy melt today.
The Guardian, keeping you safe on Channel 5.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. AIDS has made the headlines again. The great American tennis player Arthur Ashe made it clear here in New York today that he very much would have preferred to keep it a private matter. But he could not because a newspaper he thought was about to make it public. And now that it's public, he said, he will do what he can to educate others that just as AIDS doesn't discriminate, we, as he put it, must not discriminate against its victims. And so we begin tonight with a family matter which will have an impact on many, many other families. Here's ABC's Dick Schaap.
He was, as always, articulate, dignified, calm. Yes, he had AIDS.
It was transmitted through a blood transfusion after one of my open-heart bypass operations.
Probably in 1983, he said, 2 years before blood began being screened for the HIV virus.
I have known since the time of my brain operation in September 1988 that I have AIDS.
Ashe, who quietly underwent the brain surgery when the HIV virus numbed his right hand, chose to keep silent about his illness until USA Today this week confronted him with a report someone had fed to the paper.
It put me in the unenviable position of having to lie if I wanted to protect our privacy. No one should have to make that choice.
Ashe reluctantly went public today and kept his composure until he tried to read a paragraph about the questions his young daughter Cameron would now face.
Cameron already knows.
He could not speak. His wife Jean came to his side.
Even though we've begun preparing camera for this news,
Ashe himself offered one bright note.
My wife and daughter are in excellent health, and both are HIV negative.
Arthur Ashe is a magnificent athlete. He won the U.S. Open twice, and he won the championship of Wimbledon. He captained the U.S. Davis Cup team, and he inspired young players throughout the world. But Ashe has transcended sports. He has chosen to fight apartheid, to stress education over athletics, to author a history of black athletes. But now he is in a battle he did not choose, that he was forced to enter. Arthur Ashe will bring the same grace to the fight against AIDS that he brought to center court at Wimbledon. Dick Schaap, ABC News, New York.
By far the most common method of contracting the AIDS virus are through intravenous drug use and unprotected sex. Still, there was a time, as Mr. Ashe made clear, when the American blood supply was far less secure. Here's our medical correspondent, George Strait.
The blood supply is not perfectly safe. No amount of testing can do that. But Red Cross officials say the odds of getting AIDS from a blood transfusion now are extremely low, about 1 in 45,000.
The risk is so low that it's one of those things that I think you can put in the back of your mind and be much more concerned about the surgical procedure itself rather than the consequences of transfusion.
But how worried should people be if they got a transfusion before 1985, as Arthur Ashe did, when the Red Cross and hospitals began to routinely test blood for HIV? Most physicians say if those patients aren't sick by now, they won't be.
The likelihood that we will find very many positives in the population today is fairly small, and I would think that the worry factor should be fairly small as well.
Of the more than 200,000 people with AIDS, more than 4,000 got it from blood transfusions, but there have been only 20 such cases since 1985. Still, officials say even now the only sure way to avoid risk is for people to donate and use their own blood for transfusion. George Strait, ABC News, Washington.
As a number of us watched Arthur Ashe's news conference this afternoon and heard him say he believed he had to come forward because he thought someone was going to make his condition public, we wondered again about celebrity and privacy and educating the public about AIDS. Here's ABC's Jeff Greenfield.
Why are we witnesses to Arthur Ashe's pain? He resents it.
After all, I am not running for some office of public trust, nor do I have stockholders to account to. It is only that I fall under the dubious umbrella of, quote, public figure, end of quote.
By some standards, that is more than enough. We live in a time when the afflictions of the famous, afflictions of all sorts, are grist for the media mill, when ailments become tabloid headlines, when the spotlight drives celebrities to confront their own mortality in public.
I have cancer of the pancreas and the liver.
Some have used their illnesses to educate. Jill Ireland's battle with breast cancer. Gilda Radner's struggle with ovarian cancer.
HIV is not a crime.
But AIDS is a very different disease, still linked in many minds with specific behavior, risky sex, IV drug use, homosexuality. To reveal that someone as famous as Arthur Ashe, or Magic Johnson, or Rock Hudson has the disease, some would argue, levels the field, makes the public understand that anyone can get AIDS. By that standard, the decision to go public should not rest with the sufferer. It is, rather, an urgent matter of public education. Which leads us with this question. Is the public's fascination with the well-known, is a public interest in AIDS education enough to force a person and his family to live out their private agony in public? Jeff Greenfield, ABC News, New York.
In a moment, we'll have the other news today. The presidential race, Bill Clinton, still has Democrats to convince. Yasser Arafat, the PLO chairman, survives a plane crash in Libya and charges that federal farm dollars are flowing to bureaucrats, not to farmers.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by DuPont.
Recently, DuPont announced that its energy unit Conoco would pioneer the use of new double-hold oil tankers in order to safeguard the environment. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. DuPont, better things for better living.
It's not that we're out to burst any balloons here. But the 1992 Buick Skylark comes with something as standard equipment that's optional on practically every import in Skylark's class. Anti-lock brakes. When you add up the cost of the car, that could save you almost $1,000. That could, of course, also help save you your life.
In presidential politics, a bit of a breather coming up if anybody chooses to take it. Virginia holds caucuses this weekend. The next primary election is 3 weeks away in Pennsylvania. After winning all 4 of the primaries yesterday, Governor Clinton said today he is not worried about all those Democrats who still say they are worried about him. Time, he said, will take care of it. Here's ABC's Chris Bury.
This morning, Governor Clinton, with a straight face, proclaimed he was leaving New York with wonderful memories. But Clinton's primary trophies were a bit tarnished. Even he had to acknowledge that many voters still had deep reservations about him.
I'm not interested in whether they love me or not. I want them to respect me, and I want them to want me to be their president.
For all the nastiness of the New York campaign, Clinton says he is now in better shape with more delegates than other frontrunners have been at this stage of the race.
Look at where I am today in terms of delegates and compare it with, Carter 76, Mondale 84, Dukakis 88. I think we're doing right well.
While the next primary may be in Pennsylvania, Clinton flew first to Peoria, where the Caterpillar Company has threatened to permanently replace nearly 13,000 striking workers. In a private meeting, Clinton asked management not to do it.
We pleaded with them. We said, look, you don't want Caterpillar to set this kind of standard. You don't want to permanently replace these strikers.
Clinton backs a bill to ban the hiring of replacement workers. Legislation President Bush and Paul Tsongas oppose. Clinton came here to show his sympathy for the strikers, a step ahead of Jerry Brown, who plans a visit later this week. Clinton had hoped to get the next phase of his campaign off to an aggressive start. But late today, his staff announced doctors have ordered Clinton home for complete rest of his ailing voice. Chris Bury, ABC News, Peoria.
Governor Clinton, as must be obvious, still has plenty of competition to overcome. Jerry Brown went to Virginia today for the Democratic caucuses this weekend. And Mr. Brown said again today, we're not going to go away quietly. Paul Songus was meeting with his advisors, deciding whether he would get back into the race. Further reminders that Bill Clinton hasn't finished the primary season yet. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
This morning's headlines were right on the money. A big day for Clinton, and yet not big enough to guarantee him the prize, though his celebration last night was Hollywood-produced to remove all such doubts.
Please welcome the next president and First Lady of the United States, Bill and Hillary Clinton.
You can't see it, but he's moving toward the stage on a 6-inch platform that raises him above the crowd. And his victory speech was designed to do much the same, to present him as the Democratic nominee, now running against George Bush and nobody else.
We're not going to tolerate 4 more years of division. We're not going to tolerate 4 more years of failure. We're not going to tolerate 4 more years of human neglect.
But to clinch the nomination before the convention, Clinton needs about 800 of the remaining 1,400 delegates. That includes so-called superdelegates, about 400 members of Congress, governors, and party officials. Despite his victories yesterday, there has been no great wave of endorsements from the superdelegate bloc. With Governor Brown still in the running and Senator Songus thinking about it, winning those last 800 delegates won't be easy for Clinton. No wonder he was seeking some détente last night with voters and delegates already decided.
And so tonight I ask you to reach out to those who did not vote for me, but voted for change. We want to be their campaign too.
All of this is just one more indication of the kind of political year it's been. A candidate who's not running gets thousands of votes. A candidate few believe can be the nominee gets thousands more. And the front runner wins 4 states and is still not quite home. Jim Wooten, ABC News, New York.
In our next segment, how the PLO chairman Yasser Arafat is doing after surviving a plane crash in the Libyan desert.
People loved the old type of granola because it was loaded with great taste. They didn't know it was also loaded with fat. Introducing a new type of granola. New Kellogg's low-fat granola for the new granola type. All the delicious whole grains, almonds, and raisins you love, but only half the fat of leading granolas. So if you like the great taste of granola, but don't want all the fat, try new Kellogg's low-fat granola. Great taste, half the fat.
They say our personality traits are formed at an early age. Presenting the 3.1-liter V6 Rodeo from Isuzu. The way we see it, it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
When the doctor told me to come in right away, I was scared. Really scared. But this burning pain was real. Boy, I gotta tell you, was I relieved when my doctor said Mylanta. He said it was heartburn. Heartburn that needed strong medicine.
Mylanta is strong medicine, strongly recommended for heartburn. It's the antacid doctors recommend most.
My doctor said Mylanta.
In Miami today, the jury which is judging the former Panamanian leader Manuel Noriega says it has a serious problem. The jury's foreman has told the judge they're not able to reach a unanimous verdict because one juror's mind was already made up before the jury began deliberations 4 days ago. The judge has ordered them to keep on trying. The chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, is recuperating tonight at a hospital in the Libyan city of Misrata. That's the Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi, at his bedside. The plane Arafat was on last night crash-landed in the Libyan desert during a sandstorm. 3 of the crew members are reported to have been killed. Yesterday, when it was feared that Arafat himself had been killed, there was enormous anxiety among Palestinians. His survival is a great relief to them, though even among many Palestinians, his political future is far from certain. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
Palestinians clogged the streets of East Jerusalem today, celebrating Yasser Arafat's survival in the Sahara. But away from all the shouting, Palestinian critics are multiplying and suggesting the chairman of the PLO has trouble on his hands.
We need professional people running our institutions
are not gangsters.
The critics say Arafat has taken on so much responsibility that he has not supervised his underlings, and they have been plundering the PLO's treasury.
Many people do not like the corruption to continue. Not only financial corruptions, but also political corruptions.
PLO money designated for schools or health centers in the territories is often winding up in the pockets of Arafat cronies to be spent on big private homes. And financial assistance, especially from Saudi Arabia, is still hard to come by because Arafat sided with Saddam Hussein in the Gulf War, one of a series of recent moves that called his political judgment into question. All of this has had the effect of enhancing the stature of Palestinian leaders inside the occupied territories, the ones dueling with the Israelis at the Mideast peace talks while the PLO sits on the sidelines. This is not the first time Arafat has been in trouble, and no one expects him to be replaced anytime soon as the Palestinians' most visible leader. But now he is facing challenges and hard questions from his own people. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Tel Aviv.
Still in the Middle East, U.S. officials said today they're concerned by reports that Iraq has moved some surface-to-air missiles into an area above the 36th parallel in northern Iraq patrolled by Allied warplanes. The U.S. and its allies had told Iraq to stay out of the region. In London, the British Prime Minister John Major and the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs, Colin Powell, met with British defense officials to discuss a possible response. There is proof at last that one of the most notorious Nazi war criminals really is dead. In 1985, when bones were discovered in a grave in Brazil, forensic experts said they probably were the remains of Joseph Mengele, the Nazi doctor known as the Angel of Death. And now genetic tests prove the bones were Mengele's, the man who sent hundreds of thousands of Jews to their deaths at Auschwitz. We'll be back in a moment.
Fleischmann's Margarine asks, what is good?
Oh, that's good. Real good. And that's very good. Fleischmann's, of course, that's good. And when you look at that, oh, there you go. That's better than good. Oh, boy.
Fleischmann's Margarine. Have you been good to yourself today?
That's good.
Fleischmann's, be good to yourself.
Here's a sweet idea for breakfast.
Try Sunsweet prune juice for a change.
It's naturally sweet and delicious.
Sunsweet prune juice adds no sugar.
It's perfect just the way it is.
Remind you of anyone?
Not really.
In medical tests, people fell asleep faster and slept better with Unisom than without.
Now I'm sleeping and sleeping.
Unisom for faster, better sleep.
Do you remember that story about the three bears? This was too big. That was too small. And finally, something fit just right. Like the new J30 from Infiniti. Now that's my definition of luxury. It's a car you just slip right into. And live happily ever after. Infiniti. Makes you want to take up driving again, doesn't it?
An important message for patients taking Cardizem SR.
I need a refill on my Cardizem SR.
You may want to see your doctor before your next refill because there's a new Cardizem available. Cardizem CD.
What's the difference?
Cardizem CD should save you money, and it contains the same medication as Cardizem SR.
Can you give me Cardizem CD?
Only your doctor can change your prescription. Ask your doctor if new Cardizem CD is right for you.
Cardizem CD. Thanks. I'll ask my doctor.
Congress was told today that one of the main ingredients in most over-the-counter cold medicines isn't doing patients any good. Medical studies indicate that antihistamines work just fine against watery eyes and runny noses caused by allergies, but they don't work on colds. Some doctors say they should be removed from cold remedies because of their side effects, like drowsiness. Another example today of government waste. Every year, the Department of Agriculture spends more than $2 billion operating field offices that disperse government aid to farmers all over the country. Today, the Senate Agriculture Committee was told that many offices are spending more on overhead than they are on the farmers. Here's ABC's Bill Greenwood.
Unicoi County, Tennessee. Senators say it is a prime example of how the Agriculture Department wastes money. 700 farmers have registered with the local USDA field office to get subsidies. But for every dollar that went to the farmers, $29 was spent on salaries and office expenses. In all, government records show that 179 field offices spent more on overhead than farmers. The program began in the post-Depression days of the New Deal. Back then, 1 American in 4 lived on a farm. Today, only 1 in 50 are farmers. Consider Fairfield County, Connecticut, where many people just plow the highway to New York. The General Accounting Office says only 10 farms receive federal payments, and yet the USDA spends $59,000 a year for a local field office. Senators say bureaucrats are just trying to save their own jobs.
Some of these places which exist not to help rural America, not to help farmers, not to help anybody else, but simply to help the people who are entrenched and holding on.
The Secretary of Agriculture says offices that are not needed will go. That would mean that employees like Ollie Ledford in Unicoi County could lose their jobs. But she has outlasted 8 agriculture secretaries, and farmers here believe Secretary Madigan will be gone long before this field office is. Bill Greenwood, ABC News, Irwin, Tennessee.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrials lost another 32 points on top of yesterday's 60-point loss to close today at 31.81. The trading was heavy. Wall Street may have been reacting to a much sharper loss on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. The Nikkei stock index lost 644 points, 3.5% of its value. Prices are at their lowest level in Japan in nearly 6 years. ABC's Bill Redeker in Tokyo on why.
The Tokyo stock market is undergoing a crisis of confidence. Analysts say Japanese banks are worried about bad loans and may soon tighten credit. So investors are unloading stocks in banks as well as in real estate and construction companies which would suffer from a credit crunch.
Investor confidence is extremely weak, just as confidence throughout the economy is very weak, both at the consumer level, the corporate level, and in the financial markets generally.
Japan's economy is weak because the worldwide recession has meant fewer orders for Japanese cars and electronics. Scandals have also undermined trust in Japan's financial markets. Today's plunge is one more indication that Japan's economy is in trouble, and that could have serious implications for the American economy. The Japanese economy is more of a threat when it is weak than when it is strong, because a less prosperous Japan is less likely to import goods from America.
And this means that American exporters who are hoping to send stuff to Japan may be disappointed.
Another disappointment? Japanese companies that have invested heavily in the United States are likely to pull out some of their capital to cover their losses at home.
They are in need to take profits wherever they can to make up for huge losses they have at home.
The economic slump here is by no means an American-style recession. There is virtually no unemployment in Japan. But as Japan protects its own by reducing its overseas investments and buying less from the U.S., there will be less Japanese money in America, which ultimately could lead to higher interest rates for Americans. Bill Redeker, ABC News, Tokyo.
The last item from overseas, the government of France has announced a major change in its nuclear policy. France is going to suspend all nuclear weapons testing for the rest of the year and challenges all other nuclear powers to follow suit. Here's a hint as to why they made the decision. 2 weeks ago, France's environmental parties won 14% of the vote in regional elections. Well, here at home, the government has always been aware that a lot of places are contaminated by radiation. Today, the Environmental Protection Agency said at more than 45,000 different sites, radiation is present where it should not be. And there are still no government regulations for cleaning up even the most dangerous sites. We'll have our final report in just a moment.
Chrysler Fifth Avenue at $22,000, the perfect balance between self-indulgence and common sense.
Now get $1,500 cash back on Chrysler Fifth Avenue.
Here's coffee. You know, my decaffeinated is darker than yours.
And you wake up perkier, and your newspaper's more in-depth.
Wait. I'll do it again. Here's your brand. My Folgers Crystals, mountain grown. I'm filling. I'm pouring. I'm darker.
Okay. Can I have a taste?
Sure. Decaffeinated Folgers Crystals, so dark and rich. Shouldn't you switch?
You know, your decaffeinated is darker than mine.
This is regular. This is better. This Bayer is regular. For headaches, Anacin is better. Why better? Regular Bayer has one ingredient. Anacin has two. A pain medicine plus a second ingredient that makes it work better. Get Anacin. Get better.
My granny spaghetti recipe. With ordinary grated topping? Oops. Some are 1/3 fats and fillers, but Kraft is 100% grated Parmesan for 100% great taste. Granny would approve.
Tonight on Nightline, tennis great Arthur Ashe. He's the latest public figure to announce that he has AIDS. We'll talk live with Arthur Ashe.
1979.
Find out this evening how one politician deals with something in his past. For better or for worse, and many people would argue for worse, during an election year it is very often personal conduct rather than public policy which invites the media's scrutiny and very often the public's curiosity. But not always. ABC's Brian Rooney reports tonight from San Francisco.
This is Barry Melton, respected defense lawyer, candidate for a municipal court judge in San Francisco.
Try and remember me when you go to the polls and vote, okay?
Some may remember this Barry Melton at Woodstock in 1970. Barry Melton was lead guitarist for Country Joe and the Fish, while other politicians faced the dilemma of what to say about what they did in the 60s. Barry Melton could not hide his record if he tried.
I used bad judgment as a teenager from time to time. Don't all teenagers use bad judgment?
Not only did Melton smoke marijuana in the 60s, he says he inhaled a lot of it. The band also produced one of the most popular anti-war songs of the Vietnam era.
It's 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam.
And I don't think that being against a war that clearly was probably a mistake is a bad thing to carry with one politically into the 90s.
And as he makes the rounds of senior citizen lunches and candidate nights at the Democratic clubs, Melton finds that people don't even ask about those things.
What is your position on the choice voucher, which would wreck the public schools?
Of course, this race does take place in San Francisco, a city that just about defined the 60s, and where Melton says that today an illegal left-hand turn is considered a more serious offense than possession of an ounce of marijuana.
For you and me.
Melton says he has nothing to be ashamed of about the old days.
If we don't learn from our experiences because we're unwilling to say we even had the experiences, we're in deep trouble.
Who knows? One day he may have to confess that back in the 90s, for a brief, foolish time, he was a politician. Brian Rooney, ABC News, San Francisco.
That's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. At program night, Arthur Ashe. Program note, Arthur Ashe will be Ted Koppel's guest later this evening on Nightline. Good night.
Wednesday, some take it slow.
How soon till we can get married?
In only 6 months.
6 months?
Some too fast.
Your mother and I are getting married next Wednesday. I'm not going to the wedding. I'm moving out.
For others, it's already too late.
Don't tell me you're pregnant when you don't even know.
An all-new Homefront, Wednesday.
You spend as much as you make.
In a city of power and greed.
Then we need to make more profits.
The newsboys had nothing.
I'm barely making a living right now.
Until Jack Kelly gave them something to believe in.
We got the power.
Tell us what to do.
If we don't act together, then we're nuts.
Something to fight for.
We don't stick together, we're nuts.
And together, they captured the heart of a nation.
You've touched people you don't even know about.
So what's it gonna be?
Disney's new musical, Newsies, rated PG.
Starts Friday at a theater near you.
I want to show you all the changes in the 92 Ford and Chevy trucks. F-150 got more aerodynamic. It got more convenient, and it got more comfortable. The Chevy just got older. Ford F-150. Prepare to be impressed.
And right now, you can get a Ford F-150 for under $10,000.